somehow the human hand can put something into an object or a performance. And Dale Chihuly refers to it as energy. I like to refer to it as a loving spirit.
Ann Harburg has done many things in the city, and I think she, in some senses, Ann has been a very visible person.
I give her credit for most of the visual art culture that we have.
Yeah, she walks with the confidence of being right, you know, and she really usually is. And when it comes to art, matters artistic or even civic, not just artistic, she has a very good kind of sense of civic and the bigger picture.
She's simply amazing. And she never stops thinking of new ideas and new things.
Anne really is a hands-on philanthropist. She really cares passionately about the individuals, not just the movements and the large institutions, but she really likes to know the artists, and she likes to help those that she believes in. And she does.
It doesn't matter whether it's, you know, taking a risk on an unknown artist or developing a new program like Pacific Art Center or whatever it might be. She's willing to be on the last little smallest branch on that tree, hanging on, taking that risk. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but she's willing to do it.
Often patrons of the arts buy art, you know, and they put stuff in their house and it looks beautiful and they have beautiful homes. Her involvement is so much more down and dirty in the sense that she uses her time and energies into sort of helping direct, you know, Pilchuck or another craft project.
And I think it goes beyond simply supporting in the way we think about whether it's through purchases or commissions or other kinds, but wanting her life and all of our lives to be infused by the different perspective that artists might bring.
She was born prematurely in an elevator going up. And so I like to say that Annie is just ahead of her time.
I was the 13th child, born on November 13th. But the first one named for Annie Laurie Westbrook Gould, who was my grandmother. She was a very strong-willed person, and I don't know how they worked this all out, but anyway, 2 daughters, married architects, and then my father was an architect.
Her father built for his wife, Anne's mother, the house Topsfield on Bainbridge, the summer house, for a wedding present.
I don't know how my father did as many things as he did in the short time that he did them, because he died in his early 60s. I think it comes from my father's side. I think there's a gene in there somewhere that responds to the artistic world. I wanted to be an actress. I love the idea of the theater. I adore the theater. But that was not on Mother's list.
Anne studied architecture, both at the University of Washington and also at the Smith College Graduate School of Architecture. And she was attending that program when her father died. And she came home to take care of her mother and could not return to school. There just wasn't the means that both she and her brother could continue school at that point, and her brother went out.
When I was going to the university, and I was the only girl in the class, but I never thought I was talented because I was supposed to be good without any training. And I do have a talent for things, and I realize now that I should have had the confidence a long time ago.
When she and John built the house in Madison Park in McGillivray in the 50s, certainly this very driving interest of hers had a powerful influence in the design. She commissioned a number of artists to design furniture. Warren Hill was instrumental in that, design lighting. She filled it with art.
I asked John to put aside $5,000, and I went to 5 artists and said, "Can you do something for me for $1,000? I don't want to hassle this thing." We go back to John, and make things difficult. And so the 5 artists did.
It really wasn't until they built the Roland Terry house in 1101 that they designed the house for art, and therefore it was possible to display it. For me, it was like living in a museum a little bit. I would bring my books home from school, and if I put them down somewhere, the next minute I knew they were whisked away to a drawer somewhere. I think building the house was something that, you know, brought them together, gave them a lot of pleasure together, and was very stimulating. But I never could get her to buy me a decent lamp. She hated all the commercial lamps. I finally had to go out and buy my own lamp for my room because I had to study with something.
She would have these soirees, she and John, and they would invite the students from Cornish to participate in these parties. Typical Ann Harburg, where she would, you know, engage everybody in the community. No one else was inviting students, but she would do that. And there'd be a pianist there playing the piano. There'd be generally a poet there that might read some poetry. There'd be a visual artist there doing something. And there we were as students being like, oh my God, look at this. And I was so impressed.
John and Ann started the Center for Child Development and Mental Retardation at the University of Washington. It came out of their having 2 children with severe challenges at birth, and Ann's determination that these children would not be institutionalized.
Sue was never going to walk or talk, okay? That was a pretty tough little message. You go to these doctors that give you these elaborate written scripts that never told you what they were saying. Never had any meaning to me. And one of the concepts of the Baha'i faith is everybody shall be educated, okay? Well, at that time, there was no help. She's in her 50s now. And you put her in an institution and you forgot her. And I said, I'd give her a good education.
Dad bought a little house out in the university district, which was called the Pilot School. And they brought several children together that were having the same problems. And those parents all banded together. And out of that pilot school and its research, that was the basis of the CDRMC.
Myrene was able to structure Sue sequentially, and eventually she graduated from high school. We've got a wonderful horse for her now, and she's got a place lined with trophies and has the self-respect and is happy.
It demonstrates her persistence, her determination to find, if the vision wasn't there then, that there ought to be an answer, that surely there were creative people in the fields who could do this if they were supported. It's not art, but her determination to support people who were thinking creatively, thinking of the frontiers, and determination to look for that frontier in other fields as well as art.
There are many great patrons of the arts, but often they serve one particular area, but it's generally fairly narrow. With Anne, it's very broad. She'll make a choice to buy an artist's work. It's not about how much it costs, or who the person is, or where it came from, or what historical significance it has. It's more about the work. It's about what she sees, how she sees it. That's the difference.
I just marvel. I think that her instincts, I've never known her to be on the wrong side of anything. Of course, that obviously means we agree. She was on the right side of lighting the freeway, on the market, on historic preservation, on just about anything that's come up in the last, 30 years?
When I see something that should be done, I try to do it. But I really need to have somebody help me do it because I didn't take any business in school. I didn't take any, lots of things that would make it possible to run a volunteer organization, which I was always connected to.
She belonged to a lot of organizations, but this one that was near and dear to her heart was the Committee of 33. They were all women, and they did such a fantastic job of creating all kinds of good things for the community.
I started the Committee of 33. I was on the Art Commission, and I saw the need. There's very important things that have to take place if you're going to have a good city, and people take it for granted.
And the purpose was to beautify Seattle. Planting trees at Lake Union, we contributed to the fountain at Seattle Center. And this year we are contributing toward having all the beading on the screen at the new Opera House. It was just a small, fun group of ladies that had a common interest.
I was here at the time that she was starting a movement to get the freeway lidded. And if you now are downtown next to the convention center, there is Freeway Park, which lids a good portion of the downtown section of the freeway. That's because of Anne.
I guess when I was on the Art Commission, I thought, I guess let's see what this 35-foot deep ditch is going to do to our city. What's it going to look like? Let's march the freeway. We carried a green branch, I think, and there were about 200 of us.
Anne got us all started. We had to do something to when they cut through the city, to beautify it.
She even hired people to march downtown, just to make sure there was a great crowd. I mean, that would be so typically her, and I'm sure they all had a French picnic when it was over. It wasn't until 1976 did we celebrate the lidding of the freeway.
I know that she just made the city council's life miserable until that thing got done, and it's a wonderful testimony to Anne. She's persistent, she's charming, she's funny, she has humor, but she is absolutely relentless when there's something that she wants to accomplish.
Anne got a bunch of her friends together, and they created the Friends of the Crafts, and for 3 summers had these great craft shows in what was then a leftover building from the fair. I think it was the Christian Science Pavilion.
In 1960, when I started Friends of the Crafts, was there only 5 places that showed crafts in America. We kept at it for 10 years with volunteers, and we had a volunteer curator, marvelous Catherine Mutter. She put on good shows, and a lot of people joined it, but we couldn't get financial support.
Anne was with a group of people who were educators, who firmly believed and really supported a center for youth to learn more about art, to actually do art.
I first met Annie in the 70s. We were both on a committee for the 1977 bond issue to turn the Nile Temple into a children's art center. I was one of the early directors, and in my tenure, we developed an Anne Gould Hauberg gallery, and we conceptualized how to have a national board of artists. And we had people like Merce Cunningham and Jack Leonard Larson and James Washington and Jacob Lawrence. And Annie was just always in the background, supporting any vision that I had and coming up with huge visions of her own.
What it does for children, it makes them into human beings. I mean, it makes them tolerant, it makes them aware, it makes them interesting themselves. It gives them their own life. It shouldn't even be a question. It's like reading, writing, arithmetic. It enlarges your mind and how you look at the world because you're looking at it through somebody else's eyes.
I think it was 70, when John and Anne were contemplating doing the Pacific Northwest Arts Center. They hired me to establish a gallery situation. We did, I think, 8 to 10 exhibitions. We started out with an exhibition of the Hauberg collection. We did a Vancouver show, Vancouver, BC show. We did a Portland show. We did a Northwest Indian show. We were in business maybe for a year and a half.
Jack Larson, famous fabric designer from Bremerton in Seattle, suggested that I contact the Haubergs, or else he contacted them, and they were interested, said that that I could do this little summer camp on their property, and they had 16,000 acres here.
John and Ann had had discussion about some kind of art center to be on the land or some special use of it.
It evolved with much talk, whether it's going to be just glass or is it going to be glass and something else. And we decided it would be just glass.
We arrived here probably in June of '71 to start Pilchuck, and Hauberg had given us one of these farms.
Dale had the ambition and John had the money, and I put it together. So I didn't have to work very hard. Dale worked very hard, and John was very generous.
I'll give you the $7,000 that you owe the bank and the $25,000 for next year. And John picked up the tab like that for about 10 years in a row.
Yeah, 1979, she was a student, and I was really taken by her tenacity to live in the accommodations at that era and come walking down the hill with her morning bag and all her things down to the lodge. And it's like, who is this woman? And why is she here? Because Pilchuck was pretty rough in 1979.
We decided upon the site that the hot shop is now. In spite of the fact that we wouldn't have any housing or any utilities, or there was no gas, no phone, no electricity.
The first year, Pilchuck, they brought all the things down that they had done, and we sold them at Friends of the Crafts for $2 and $3. They were simply awful. I wouldn't even buy anything. And when I realized what it's grown into, it's, you know, when they raise over $1 million every year on glass, it's just amazing.
In one simple sentence, what makes it a good art? What makes a good athlete? What makes a good musician? Now, it's all a matter of a combination of things. And Dale has a hell of a big combination of things.
The school created a totem pole to honor the founders of the school, Ann Harburg, John Hauberg, and Dale Chihuly. And Annie's very proud of being on top. I think it's great that a woman is.
And I think out of the years of Pilchuck and around the world, when glass has come away from being just a craft, it's more than what the general public thinks of a craft.
It's the arts and crafts, you know, really, truly with Anne. I mean, I think she very well understands what fine art is, and she understands what craft is, and I think for her, they both have value, great value. And I'm not sure that one is more valuable than the other, even though there may be a difference.
What you put first is important. And actually, where the division came, I don't know. Because in Japan, from a little tiny bowl up to a great free painting, it's all considered beautiful and it's all considered equally.
The crafts have had a really tough go of it over the years, trying to gain parity with the other arts, the so-called fine arts. It's really been a tough road. All of us who like the crafts have sort of had that issue sort of binding us together over the years, always ready to do battle for the crafts. And Anne was like that too.
I mean, it all to her, in a way, is the same. And from that standpoint, it might make it more understandable about her concept of craft, because she's not talking about an object, you know, as a, you know, this object is a craft object. She's talking about a point of view, you know, again, about living in a space that's crafted, sitting in a chair that's crafted.
I started out in the crafts. I love the crafts, and I think the crafts can be considered art. Let's just put them in the same bag, because the fine art should have a craft to it, and the craft should have an art to it.
I think she's always been interested in what's going on. She wants to know not only what the new art is, she wants to know the people who make it and talk to them about what it's about and why they do it. And she cares about how they're supported, too.
I look at Annie not just as a collector of art, but really a collector of people. I mean, she just will meet someone, and if they're interesting, she just believes in them and then becomes completely involved in the process.
Well, I think you get acquainted with the person. Sometimes you right away, and sometimes it takes a while. I think it's just like you make friends.
Being there with the artist, for the artist, alongside the artist. Not telling the artist what to do, not telling them how much it should be, not defining it, but being there with them. That's what she does.
Well, my father said this, and I repeat it. If you don't support your artists, you won't have them. And if I woke up in the morning and lived in some of these suburbs without any redeeming feature, I would walk off the end of the plank and drown myself.
She was very sensitive to buy from exhibitions. I think she wanted to support the whole process, the gallery process and the artist and the museum.
She was the first person to show up. She was the first person that bought a piece of art from me.
This is Ramona Solberg's necklace, which I adore, but there's another one I wear quite frequently because it goes with everything. And then these are Nadine Correa's earrings. They're terribly simple.
Anne's been there from the very beginning. She bought the first piece of jewelry I made when I graduated from the University of Washington. And it was a little enamel brooch. It's kind of a Voyager 1 out in space kind of thing. She immediately took me to see the work of Claire Falkenstein at the Polly Friedlander Gallery. I think she was trying to get me interested in glass, but I liked metal too much. A long time later, Anne persuaded me to purchase some large semi-precious stones. They were big, unwieldy, but beautiful, and I didn't know what to do with them until finally I thought, oh, I'll make little containers around them because I love making containers. So I did, and it was a momentous event for me because suddenly I started a whole new series that I'm still working on, and it all started from confronting those large stones. So, you know, without Anne, what would I have done?
Flora and I were very early, some of the few women that became involved with Pilchuck on a level of, we were the first women to teach in the hot glass program there, glass blowing. You know, it's a sort of was a male-dominated thing at the time. And Annie was the first person from the outside, if you will, who I was aware of really picked up on the gender issue and championed that for us and had the tenacity to get up in front of a crowd and talk about us and our art and our influence as women in the arts. And so obviously that endeared her to us.
I showed Annie a couple of little sculptures that I had done, miniatures. We went into her bedroom and she said, I need a piece of furniture for this area right here, and I need it to do these certain things, flat file paper. She always is trying to organize her life. And so I did a very quick drawing for her at the time, and she looked at it and she said, this is fabulous. Show me some more formal drawings and we'll move forward with it. I had not built any furniture before that time. I don't have an educational background in art. And she saw something in the little things that I showed her and had a belief in me that I didn't understand where it came from. And it was really quite wonderful and gave me a belief in myself that I could actually pull this off. And I think that is her gift, is being able to see what the artist can't in themselves.
I've never known anyone to actually do as many things, attend as many things as she does. But that's always been a part of her, and her attendance has probably been as important as her buying or her other support.
She's on the board of the Glass Museum. She still has a relationship with the Tacoma Art Museum, primarily as sort of bridges to, quote, the classic Northwest art, which is what Tacoma Art Museum is totally dedicated to.
Even though she didn't live in the city of Tacoma, she was a very active trustee and very committed. She offered her glass collection to the Tacoma Art Museum, so we worked on that. She offered other works of art to the museum, and as a curator, of course, I wanted to solicit those too and work with her.
I remember early on going to conversations of opening a glass museum at Tacoma. She was always there at all these meetings and all these discussions. A lot of these projects, when they get started, they have great ideas and great expectations. And then when the realities of the costs start coming into play, they start compromising this or compromising that or doing away with this aspect of it. Well, she was there to make sure it didn't happen, that they didn't get rid of the cone, which they wanted to do. She said, no, I'll leave the board. I'm out of here. I'm going to quit. You can't get my support anymore if you're going to do that. And then, whoa, okay, well, we'll keep the cone, So she'd be the one that would make it happen. She's not out to please everyone. She's helping to define parameters. People don't like it necessarily sometimes. They resent her outspokenness sometimes. But in the end, it's what needed to be done. It's what makes the decision. It's what makes us move ahead. She's able to do that.
We went back to a banquet where Annie was given the Visionary Award for the American Craft Museum, and she gave just a really incredibly articulate speech about architecture and shaping a city and how it's an honor to be in a position to create either a piece of art or a piece of architecture, and telling the audience to think about their cities. And I was really proud to be sitting there.
I want to put a circle around a part of Tacoma and say, okay, nobody can work in this section of the town because we should have the most beautiful city in the world. I mean, we've got everything. The green and the trees and the water and the mountains, everything. We know what we do. And the weather even. Okay. Nobody can work in that space unless, no banker, no contractor, no developer, unless he's taken the course, what is architecture? And passes it and puts it like a doctor and like a lawyer. It has to go on the wall where you can see it. Passed.
I met Anne several years ago. She came up to me at an art opening and asked me, young man, are you going to the party? And I said, well, I don't think so. And she said, young man, you must come to the party, and I'll introduce you to everyone. And what I didn't realize was when she said come to the party, she didn't mean an event for just that evening. Life, knowing Anne Gould Hauberg and being her friend, is the party. So since that time, I've been to a wonderful party that I could never, ever replace or forget.
Oh, thank you, dear. That's enough said.
Yes.